podcast about the simple and yet strategic choices that you can make, and of course I can make, in becoming the best version of ourselves. My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and I'm the host of 3 Words Podcast. And as a life coach and a business consultant, I am really excited to be here with you today. Whether you are listening through our podcast or you are watching through our YouTube channel, thank you for joining us as a part of this episode. I'm excited because during this global pandemic, we have found a place and a space and have been able to social distance in such a way that we can actually record an episode today with my dear friend, Dr. Tyler Schwanz, chiropractor, as well as life coach and consultant with D&B Coaching. And I am interested to see how this conversation will go today as we talk about 3 words that are a bit provocative and potentially painful. Would you share those with us, Tyler?
Yes, they are. Forgive without exception.
Forgive without exception. Now, I'm not sure how you tolerate, to be quite honest, that phrase, because obviously I think we all would exult and feel great about this notion of forgiveness, but without exception?
I know.
I would say, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation, why we've chosen these 3 words, I would say that forgiveness is and can be unconditional, whereas reconciliation is not. So for instance, forgiveness is a gift to yourself, not a gift to be given to others. So I've actually in recent days, as a part of this really unprecedented time we call the COVID-19 pandemic, been asked to do a variety of webinars and helping people continue to experience wellness, overall wellness in their lives during this challenging time. And the 3 major conversations I'm having, Tyler, via webinar and Zoom and all the different things, the platforms that we're using digitally, is emotional well-being. Secondly, physical vitality. And thirdly, continuing to cultivate meaningful relational connections. And what I'm hearing from those who are engaging with me in the conversation about relationships and meaningful connection is that it's a hard time, particularly in those tense relationships, in those friendships that maybe there's been some unforgiveness, there's been some tension, in relationships that people feel are toxic and difficult, where maybe there have been unresolved issues that have never been talked about before. And now we're all quarantined, sheltering in place. We almost have to face them. So I would say in those situations, forgive unconditionally, realizing though that the relationship and the connection and the intimacy of that relationship, it really depends on how that person responds to that forgiveness.
Forgiveness sometimes feels like you're giving up or giving in or showing weakness, when in reality you are gaining, you are able to move forward, you are augmenting your own ability to engage in other relationships. Without forgiving, you may not even realize that you have not fully forgiven someone from way back when, and it is inhibiting your ability to make meaningful relationships and connections moving forward. And you're harming people that had nothing to do with your hurt, and they don't deserve that. And so forgiveness is not just a gift to yourself, but for everybody moving forward that's going to cross your path that does not deserve this version of you that has not forgiven the hurts of your past.
I'm actually working with a client right now who is working through some really challenging memories between him and his father. And he came to me and said, it's been years since I've been interacting with my father, and out of the blue, and this was even right before the pandemic, out of the blue, he reached out to me and said, I want to begin to have conversations with you. Can we talk? Can we email? Can we chat on the phone? And this individual reached back to me and said, I can't do it. I can't do it because my dad is unhealthy. My dad is hurtful. My dad is destructive even and really challenging for me. And he's like, I can't forgive him. And that's my response. My response was to this individual, no, you can forgive him. You can set yourself free. But I would be very careful moving forward in that relationship to make sure that it doesn't continue to hurt and continue to be unhealthy and continue to be toxic. That unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. And when I talk about forgiving unconditionally, I'm not thinking in terms of forgiveness does not mean that we don't establish boundaries.
Yeah.
Because boundaries are going to be really important, particularly in those really intense conflicts and tension.
And I think I've experienced both sides of it. You know, I've both struggled to forgive, and I think that there are others that still haven't forgiven me. As we were discussing, you know, you asked, and I'm I guess visually even uncomfortable you talking about this because I feel like your wantingness to forgive others is very much correlated with your desire to be forgiven and your perception of your own need to be forgiven. Yes. And if at any point in time in my life, if I feel like I had done someone wrong, I know that it eats away at my soul until I can get some sort of verbal, you know, written, any sort of forgiveness from them. And sometimes you get that. Yeah. Sometimes you don't get that. And you have to wonder the rest of your life, is there someone else out there that is just, that hasn't forgiven me, that is cursing me, that is just hating me? And
Tyler, I cannot imagine that being true, knowing you.
I know, but in reality, it's true, man. Like, I'll give you this example from my life, and it's not comfortable to talk about, but so I grew up in a family business. My dad started the business back in 1986. Okay. I grew up, and so from right around the 90s, the employees that were there in the 90s were with our company all the way up until maybe about 4 years ago. And unfortunately, when I joined the practice, the direction that the practice was going in shifted, but in such a positive way. In such a positive way that allowed us to serve so many more people and do so in a manner that was going to be sustainable for the next 30 years. Mm-hmm. And my dad was on board, I was on board, but the team that he had hired 20 years prior that had seen me in, not diapers, but seen me grow up.
Right.
Come to my graduations, seen me get married, like people that I've known for a long time.
Real significant history.
Very significant history. Now, they were working at a job that, quite frankly, they never agreed upon. They were hired so long ago that the job had changed so much that they were now working at a job that they were neither willing to complete nor were they qualified. Had they come into the office and applied for the job that day, they probably wouldn't have gotten the job. And I don't mean to go on and on about it, but it was so difficult for me. We tried time and time again to train. We tried for years to try and maintain this relationship. And when it came down to the brass tacks day of it's not working, we need to go in a different direction, I was definitely the recipient of some unforgiveness, of some unkind words.
That must have been so painful.
It was so painful.
Yeah.
So painful because you never want to be in that kind of situation. And you hope and you pray that that forgiveness has been given at this point in time.
And you meant no harm. And in many ways, I think it's a beautiful illustration and a painful one. And I appreciate you being transparent and vulnerable even here as a part of this podcast conversation. And it just highlights this idea that oftentimes those who have hurt us, as painful as it may be, they didn't do so intentionally. And one of the reasons is hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. If we're feeling hurt, we tend to lash out. If we're feeling frustrated, we tend to say things at times, I know I have, that I don't mean. And I think oftentimes to not take it personally, but when I'm most forgiving, it's because I am in a place, in a space in my life where I know that I also need forgiven. Mm-hmm. When I'm aware of the fact that I unintentionally, and even at times rudely and intentionally, hurt someone. And the need I have for forgiveness, as you said, you long for that kind of resolution when you're feeling that. And someone out there, the thought of someone not feeling good about you and being unforgiving toward you is so hard because you care so deeply about people. I think as we move toward each other in this process of reconciliation, it's hard work, but it's necessary work. And it's powerful, but what happens is it tends to break down when one of us digs in our heels and says, I'm going to self-protect. And that's typically what it is. It's I'm self-protecting because I don't want you to hurt me any more than you already have. And many people have said to me too, well, once that individual apologizes sincerely, then I will forgive them. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness does not need to wait on an apology.
Yeah.
It can be given freely and unconditionally, as you said, and you actually added to my notion that this is a gift to yourself, but also the gift to all of your family. Because if you're carrying around a grudge, others are feeling it.
Yes.
If you're carrying around bitterness, you can't be better. You can't continue to become the best version of yourself if you're bitter. So wow. This is a hard topic. And particularly now during the pandemic, because I am encouraging those that I love and those that I'm spending time with. I'm saying to them, life is short. Mm-hmm. And do you want to come to the end of your life and have all of these relationships that are tattered and torn and unresolved? And I hear these stories, and I'm sure you do as well, where it's like, we haven't talked in 30 years. Mm-hmm. And this is parent and child, or this is sibling. And I think surely someone should make the move, because what I'm hearing even toward the end of life, typically that's one of those things that is weighing upon us. Like, wait, before I pass from this life to the next, I want to resolve this particular relationship. And oftentimes we don't get an opportunity to do that.
And I'll tell you what, the closer you are with someone, the greater ability there is to feel such high highs and such depth of relationship, but also the greater potential there is for such depth of hurt. Mm-hmm. And going through relationships for fear of that hurt and not engaging in the depth that you could provide of yourself to someone else is robbing them and robbing you of those potential highs, those potential memories that you could be making with them. And to forgive and to be forgiven. Yes. I've never personally suffered from diagnosed clinical depression. The closest that I have ever felt where I think I know what they're going through with that cycle, that hole, that deep dark hole that feels just absolutely you cannot get out of, is in a moment where I feel like I am unforgivable, or where I feel like I will never be able to get out of this current situation and be forgiven and move forward and have deep relationships, because that is what makes life worth living, or the depth of relationship. But if I'm not forgiving, or if I'm allowing unforgiveness to stop me from taking the chance with my next relationships, then I'm not living my fullest life.
I love it. And that's true. We don't want to be so paranoid about hurting others that we don't enter into deep, meaningful relationship with others, and that we would not be paranoid about creating distance. Because the reality is, those that we love and the people that we love and those that we're closest to, as you said, we're going to hurt each other. Mm-hmm. And it simply requires in those moments, and maybe it's even 10 or 15 or 20 years later for some of you listening in today or watching, to be able to say, I was wrong and I am sorry.
Yes.
And will you forgive me? And even if they don't, we can offer forgiveness.
Yes.
We can choose as a choice to forgive without exception.
The best thing about forgiveness is that it's undeserved. Thank you that it is an undeserved thing. And because of that, if there's anyone who is watching or listening and you believe that what I have done is unforgivable,
it's not.
Someone can give you the gift of forgiveness, even if you believe you are unforgivable, even if it is undeserved. It is a choice. It is not something that is earned. It is a choice to be able to forgive and to be able to receive that forgiveness.
Thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I didn't know if it was going to happen in the midst of this pandemic, but you have reminded me, and you have offered incredibly heartfelt and vulnerable illustrations of what it means to forgive without exception. Thank you, my friend. For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.